Thank you everyone for attending the talk, especially my advisors who in the last month have been able to manage remotely and get their schedules. It's especially at the end of this semester, end of summer, with so many PhDs clustered around together. So I really thank them for their cooperation. So today I'm going to share with you some of my research experiences that I've had as a PhD student at WinLab over the past 5 years. I got a chance to work on a lot of interesting problems thanks to Dr. Ray's guidance. And my focus of today's talk will be mainly on cross-layer network architecture for improving the packet forwarding efficiency in multi-hop wireless networks. So I'm going to explain some of the problems and then motivate solutions. So if you look at emerging wireless networks, you see that there is basically a convergence from the typical hotspot based model where you have single access point serving many clients down to you're getting more and more multi-hop mesh network scenarios where deployed in outdoor communities as well as in indoor mesh networks, where the idea is essentially you're trying to extend the coverage of the single hotspot based access point using multiple of, if I can call them repeaters or forwarding nodes essentially. Similarly, in sensor networks, there's a lot of sensor network deployments where the idea is they have been deployed with a specific purpose, such as habitat or structural monitoring. And the goal there is if there is an event that's detected and needs to be reported, the information flows across several hops all the way back to the sink. So if you look across those models, there is a commonality that you see there, and one of them being that most of them are based on a CSMA based MAC, where the idea is you listen before you try to send something. And the second commonality is that there's many devices which are trying to reach a potential a gateway or a portal, if you will, through by using multiple hops and other nodes as their relay points essentially to try and reach the gateway. So as already reported by N. Gupta and Kumar's work, as the number of nodes increases, there is problems with these networks in terms of scalability. So let's look at some of the reasons, just a quick overview. Some of you may already be familiar with all these, but essentially these are the main problems that lead to the performance issues that we have in the previous slide. So basically you have bottlenecks at the links because of the interference and CSMA MAC. Only one of the links can be active in a given interference area. You have the classical hidden node and the exposed node problems associated with CSMA MAC. And when you move to more multi-hop networks, essentially you have problems which is self-interference, where since the radios right now can only transmit or receive, they can't do that simultaneously since they are half duplex. Essentially what happens is the first hop and the subsequent hops kind of compete for access to the medium along with the first hop, and that results in a self-interference of the flow. And similarly, if you have multiple flows crossing each other in the same interference area, you have interference amongst them. To compound to it all, routing has its own, so routing protocols do their own things basically. So first of all, it's been pointed out that your traditional shortest path routing may not be the best, especially in wireless networks. Plus, as your number of nodes increases and topology changes, this results in a large overhead because there's a lot of routing messages that flow. And the main reason why it hurts your actual data traffic is because all of this routing is done in band, and at least in most of the scenarios, and it's actually disruptive to actual ongoing data traffic. And of course, there's other problems which are mandated, more like man-made, I would say, because these are mandated by the protocols, and the protocols mandate some mandatory interframe spacings as well as packet overheads. So overall, if you look at all of these constraints, the actual performance that you get out of a multi-hop or even a single hop wireless network at the application layer is probably 30 to 40% of what the actual physical layer capacity can provide you. So all of these issues essentially translate into the following network layer challenges which we look at. The first, as I mentioned, being as the number of nodes increases and there's too many hops as you try to reach the portal to send your information out, and this results in basically scalability issues with the increasing number of nodes. As I mentioned before, there is poor utilization of the available underlying capacity because of very poorly coordinated medium access protocols and as well as routing inefficiencies. As I mentioned, there's routing has its own issues where since Majority of the concepts have been borrowed from the wired domain. To begin with, they are based on the shortest path or the hop count based metric, which may or may not be necessarily suited well for an underlying wireless network, which is inherently different from a wired in terms of the link quality. And finally, the main problem is basically for a multi-hop network, a single hop wireless LAN, which was mandated or which was outlined in the 802.11 standard, that has been kind of hacked or extended to the concept of a multi-hop design. So it's got its own set of disadvantages, and a few of them I'll point as I go along the way. So one of the important thing is that in multi-hop networks, essentially, there is the packets, as the packets exit a particular source and enter an intermediate relay node, each and every packet is processed by the relay node. There is a route lookup, there is a queuing, and there's a recontention to get access to the next subsequent hop. So essentially, overall, it results in a higher end-to-end latencies for the packet, which we will try to address as we go along in the talk. So if you look at the solution space, what people have done in this area, you can broadly classify them as layered solutions. So there's solutions at every stack that people have proposed. For example, at the physical layer, the idea or the new innovations in the, for example, MIMO as well as beamforming, which use spatial diversity and are part of the 802.11n standard, they essentially try to solve the problem by throwing extra capacity or extra raw speeds and assuming that the rest of the protocols are still going to be as inefficient as possible. So the physical layer solutions essentially try to throw extra capacity at the problem. But if you look at the whole space, essentially what the related work is doing is they are trying to fit or minimize the conflict or interference between flows and try to maximize the utilization of the network overall. So if you look at the figure on the right, essentially it captures what are the different dimensions people are exploring or have explored in the past in order to improve the performance of the network. So just to summarize briefly, the frequency dimension, since there is like orthogonal channels available, you can try to put your flows, interfering flows in different frequencies so as to minimize the interference. Along the time dimension, basically you can coordinate your flows in the time domain using either explicit TDMA like MAC or some kind of a loose link scheduling so that they don't interfere in the time domain. And if you look at the spatial domain, so basically if you're given a 2D grid of nodes and you want to try and pack as many overlapping flows as possible, then the idea is to tune either their transmit powers or the sensitivity of the receivers so as to try and fit as many overlapping flows in the given amount of space. So essentially these are the dimensions that have been explored over the past, and there's of course combinations that people have looked at, especially the 3D approach where this is an analytical work which takes into account a joint problem of looking at time scheduling, frequency assignment, as well as route selection. So all of them are considered as a single shot, and it basically presents some analytical upper bound on what can be achieved. But what's missing in some of the networks is what we try to address, and the main problems that are still out there in the open is there is still a lack of a systematic protocol design and a framework, first of all, to address the scalability of the network. So the previous approaches, they either target one or two of the layers or a specific problem associated with one of the layers. But there is a lack of a comprehensive architecture and design that spans across several layers and looks at the network as a whole and what is the problem associated with it. So if we first look at, in our first part of the thesis and my work, we look at specifically the problem of addressing scalability and improving the overall performance of a multi-hop wireless mesh network. And we have basically looked at a self-organizing hierarchical architecture, which I'll talk about later. So the next challenge we try to look at is there is inherent inefficiencies in the underlying medium access control protocol. And even though the previous approaches, such as cross-layer routing solutions, have been proposed, what the cross-layer routing solutions essentially do is they still try to hide the underlying inefficiencies of the MAC by trying to route around or find kludges based on some kind of underlying metrics. But still, the fundamental problems associated with the MAC are still left untouched, and you just try to patch around them by finding some routes such that you don't have to interfere with other flows. So we address the basic problem of packet forwarding efficiency in multi-hop wireless networks. And in the final part, essentially, we try to motivate a more path-centric design, and this comes from one of the very beautiful paper by Ramanathan, and that's kind of a motivation for our work. And the basic idea is that instead of thinking of it in the traditional hop by hop way, where a packet is generated and consumed at every hop, again recontent and go out, can you think of it like as a switch end to end, and can as a fast cut through kind of a transfer, such that you can match and pack as many flows together as possible with very good performance overall and improving the latencies. So that's kind of motivates the final part of a thesis. And of course, not to undermine the other efforts, basically in all of these, there has been some experimental investigations that have fed into some of the intuitions that we got, and definitely have there's a couple of contributions that I'd like to mention at the end related to the orbit infrastructure. So just to give a picture of what the talk is going to be, first part essentially is what I tried for the first year and a half, which is essentially addressing the scalability of multi-hop networks. And what we have designed is a self-organizing hierarchical ad hoc network. Our focus is mainly on protocols for self-organization, and at the end of this, what I learned was essentially what is the design space that's available here, and what are essentially where is the scope for improvement. So the first part essentially gave me that kind of a motivation that led me into doing the subsequent things. So in the second part, as I mentioned, we look at specific routing as well as forwarding enhancements, and what we propose is a cross-layer enabled cut-through kind of architecture. And in the final part, essentially, we kind of motivate going from more hop-based to a switching-based concept, where you try to coordinate the flows loosely in terms of time, and try to also kind of motivate a model for providing differentiated services at the end of it. And our methodology has been a mix of simulations as well as motivational orbit experiments. So let me begin with the first part. Essentially, this as you already have mentioned, the basic problem with this multi-hop ad hoc network as the number of nodes increases is basically your throughput falls as the square number of nodes. And so this is collaborative work with my colleagues Suli, Lalit and Bhaskar, who have graduated long back. And Suli has mainly looked at more analytical model for basically understanding the capacity of a hierarchical network. So based on the outputs from previous work from Liu and Towsley as well as Suli's work, essentially what we have introduced is to address this problem, an intermediate or a tiered architecture where we have a set of or a middle tier of forwarding nodes, if you can call them, which have dual interfaces in our design, but it can have more than two. And the idea is that these forwarding nodes essentially have one interface that is the infrastructure interface, which points towards the access points, and one is the access interface, which serves the underlying lower layer of mobile nodes. So we have introduced this middle layer of forwarding nodes, and the focus of our work is mainly to address these questions, which is given that you have this deployment of mobile nodes, forwarding nodes, and access points, how do these devices self-organize into hierarchies which yield a good performance improvement in terms of capacity? What's the protocol design, considering that you have heterogeneous devices that might be participating in the network? So by heterogeneous, I mean there might be devices like laptops, PDAs, which have completely different energy and CPU constraints as compared to any other more powerful machines. So basically, we have to deal with the heterogeneity of devices in our protocol design, and we have ensured that we do that. We've done performance evaluation based on simulations as well as experimental stuff. And even though I'm not going to talk about this in detail, we also tried to extend this model and see and do a cost performance evaluation, whether this model can be actually made useful and be applied to a given metropolitan area by making some assumptions about what's the density of population that you're trying to serve. So we came up with some interesting numbers here, which I can talk offline later on. And there's some other interesting design considerations for dual radio forwarding node, especially where we found that if you place your two radio cards too close to each other, and so as to make a very compact forwarding node, you run into problems because of near field effect, which you kind of cannot, I mean, which may be obvious to some of the physical layer people, but they were not very intuitive to me to begin with. So let me just focus quickly on the protocols that we have looked at. And essentially, whenever a network comes up, till the time you can actually send data transfer, you can actually send data, there's a lot of things that happen in the middle, and we focus on, so basically whenever the nodes come up, you have to, especially the forwarding nodes and the access points come up, the main problem is bootstrapping the network, as in what are the initial frequencies, power levels, etc., that the network or the nodes have to come up with so as to kind of fit well with what's already there. So we look at basically a bootstrapping mechanism to address that. And as I mentioned before, considering that you have a hierarchy of or a heterogeneity of devices, the problem is once all of these devices have come up in the desired frequencies, etc., how do they organize themselves into topologies, considering that they have different inherent constraints of their own. And finally, we look at, so that's what motivates our discovery protocol, and I'll talk about it. And essentially, we then move on to a more integrated discovery as well as discovery assisted routing, which works on a subset of links provided by discovery. So just to quickly explain how we design our bootstrapping mechanism. So the idea here is this was motivated by a simple experiment where there's just two nodes, two flows actually, 4 nodes. And what we did was fixed one of the flows on one channel and moved the other flow starting with the same channel all the way across 11 channels of A to 11B. So the idea here was to see the effect of how the channel selection impacts each flow. So basically, if you look at the figure on the right, what you see is if when the flows are on the same channel, which is indicated by the channel separation of 0, their throughputs are roughly the same. The MAC protocol tries to make sure that each of them is getting a fair share of the throughput. That's around 3 Mbps for a 11B network. But as the second flow moves away one channel at a time, you see that the performance of both the flows drastically suffers, especially when the node is on like 1 or 2 channels away from the other flow. And we believe the reason for this is basically because of failed carrier sensing at each of the flows, because the receive power from the adjacent flow is very close to the carrier sense threshold of that flow. And the idea then, the problem that occurs is that the MAC is not able to detect, or the carrier sensing is not able to detect an ongoing activity and triggers a false signal to MAC to send a packet, and this results in more collisions and a poorer performance. So the main idea behind our bootstrapping mechanism, and which specifically deals with frequency selection whenever a new forwarding node is introduced in the network. So this is basically the motivation for that. And we look at very two simple heuristics. And the first one we call boost A. And the idea is here you want to try and avoid nodes which are, or transmissions which are very close to your receiver sensitivity threshold. So that's what this algorithm does essentially. So whenever a new forwarding node comes up, it has to see what channel it will use in order to serve the underlying mobile nodes. And so whenever a new forwarding node comes, it will do a sweep of the channels, and it will basically try to find out which channel to choose based on the activity on that channel, and it will try to match and see and try to fit into a channel with the least such that the transmissions are above the carrier sense threshold and will enable that the MAC will perform well basically. And in the second part, which is a more simpler implementation, is basically just count the number of beacons heard in each channel and try to fit or park yourself on the channel with the least number of beacons. So that's a very simple heuristic. But just give you a feel of, like, even these simple heuristics essentially gave us 30 to 50% performance improvement over a random channel selection. And you might wonder why I compared with random channel selection. I mean, random seems like probably the worst thing to do, but I was reading some of the related work and or even the recent literature. So there is a radar detection mode that now 802.11 standards have to, or the radio have to comply with. And the radar detection, so when in the 5 gigahertz band, whenever you detect a radar, the nodes are supposed to back off for a certain duration of time and immediately jump to a frequency. And that particular algorithm is called DFS, or dynamic frequency selection. And that algorithm essentially recommends that you do a completely random channel assignment. So basically, it is not completely unheard of. So moving on, so once now we have the frequencies assigned and the nodes have parked onto certain frequencies, the next problem is how do you form topologies considering that you have heterogeneous devices to deal with. So basically, in our discovery mechanism, the main idea is you want to based on the device capability, you want to try and have a layer in the middle, which is called discovery layer. And it essentially tries to look at the underlying device's capabilities and then present only those subset of links up to the routing protocol, so that the routing can use only those links based on the device's constraints. So this in turn has two benefits. One is to accommodate heterogeneity of devices, and the second is to basically reduce a lot of routing overhead. So this is a very simple illustration, essentially where the objective of our network is to minimize the energy consumption at the mobile nodes while maintaining a certain amount of latency. So just to illustrate quickly, in the first phase, essentially the nodes will sense based on the beacons that are sent out on each channel. In the evaluate phase is where different devices based on their capabilities will take different actions. For example, at the mobile node, it will look at what's the transmit power that I heard the beacon with. So basically the beacons have a transmit power appended, and the mobile node will record what's the receive signal strength it heard the beacon with. It will try to choose a neighbor such that it doesn't consume too much energy in going to the next top neighbor. Whereas at the forwarding node, there might be a different constraint, which is you want to try and reduce the overall delay of the network. So you choose the least number of hops to the access point. So you can have different constraints, which results in a logical topology, which can then be presented up to the routing layer. So essentially, we compared the performance of this distributed approach with centralized cases, and we found that our heuristic performs well as compared to the centralized, and it is quite comparable to the performance that you get from comparative centralized topologies. And in terms of the routing overhead, there is a significant improvement in the routing overhead because you're now using only a subset of links instead of the whole whole set of links that are available. So the whole protocol stack was essentially then implemented. We implemented the whole design in NS2 simulation and implemented multiple channel support in the NS2 with scanning, association, etc. And basically the overall performance improvement that we saw after implementation is we get about a 2.5 times improvement in the overall performance of the network. So just to verify this, we also did a simple orbit experiment where the idea was emulated a flat kind of a network with 20 users essentially and 2 access points. So here the idea was corresponding to a flat network. Every node goes over multiple hops and tries to reach the sink, and we have 2 such clusters. And then we introduced the concept of a hierarchy where we threw in a couple of forwarding nodes, threw in a couple of more frequencies that the forwarding nodes could operate on. And essentially what that results is gives us very similar performance gains as we saw in the previous case, where you can go all the way up to 50 megabits per second in this given kind of a network as compared to the 20 megabits per second total system capacity for the flat case. So just to briefly summarize our first part of the work, we have looked at essentially protocols for self-organization in the hierarchical network, bootstrapping, discovery-assisted routing. We have looked at a system prototype as well as simulation-based evaluations, which result in about a 2.5% times improvement in the capacity or the actual performance as compared to flat. And what we have not mentioned here is basically its applications to a metropolitan mesh network, which we have also looked at, and other design considerations. Sorry. Yeah.
Do your access points in both the flat and the hierarchical design are they single radio access points or dual radio?
They are single radio access points. Forwarding nodes are dual radio.
So I guess my deeper question is that is the performance improvement that you're seeing due to the hierarchy that you're introducing, or is it because you're introducing the nodes with 2 radios? So if I put a dual radio access point as opposed to forwarding nodes.
Dual radio access point.
Yeah. So is it because you're introducing nodes with multiple radios? Or
no, I believe it's because you are. I think the tiered architecture is what gives you the capacity gains, because if you have just a single access point with 2 radios serving 100 clients and all going multiple hops, then it's not going to give you the same benefit. As basically it's kind of a load balancing at different tiers of the hierarchy as you go up essentially. So moving on to the second part of the work, which basically now we've looked at a hierarchical architecture, and now our focus is essentially on, let's say, the backhaul or the network comprising of the forwarding nodes and the APs, if you will. And we look specifically at some of the cross-layer approaches that have been already proposed for better route selection, as well as I mentioned, point out the basic problems with the packet forwarding efficiencies in multi-hop networks. So this is just a summary of some of the work that has been done in this area already, and the basic idea here is, as it was pointed out, the shortest path may not be the best path as far as a wireless multi-hop network is concerned. And the reasons for that being, basically your wireless link cannot be characterized in the same way as you have a wired link, because it has different loss ratios, basically variable loss ratios, variable bit rates, because the underlying card adapts to the environment and can use a different modulation scheme. And basically there's different parameters which are essentially, so the whole idea here is that you are trying to capture the behavior of the underlying layer or the underlying link into the decisions that you make when you select your routes. And the existing approaches basically use one or a combination of these techniques in order to do the route selection. But there is a problem with the associated all of these methods, and essentially the problem lies with how they try to estimate the link or the quality of the link. So the methodology that's used in most of these methods is essentially you try to send a broadcast probe every so often, and typical being a 134 byte broadcast packet is sent every 1 second. And as you all know, basically the broadcast is sent typically at the lowest available physical layer rate, which is 1 Mbps for 11 Mbps network. So we argue that a 134 byte broadcast packet sent at 1 megabit per second cannot effectively represent what a 1024 byte or a different byte size data packet going at a different rate will encounter when using the same link. And a similar observation was also reported previously. And to add to it all, since you are already adding some extra probing overhead, it might actually be disruptive to your ongoing data traffic and might bias the accuracy of your estimation. So in our approach, what we propose is essentially a completely passive approach, where the idea is every node just does local bookkeeping based on the outgoing data traffic that it is sending out. And the simple calculation is essentially this. So whenever the MAC layer gets a packet, it will stamp that interval, and the next timestamp will be when an acknowledgement for that packet is correspondingly received from the peer node. So the time between these two events essentially captures the time that the packet had to wait in the queue to get access to the medium, which kind of is an indicator of what's the load of the medium. The time it took to transmit the data, which is proportional to what is the underlying speed that the link is supporting right now to the next hop, and the link delivery rate, which comes in how many retransmissions, if at all, were needed to successfully send this packet out until an acknowledgement was received back. So essentially this TX time per packet captures all of these three things, and the TX bytes correspondingly captures how many useful data bytes were actually sent out during this exchange. So if you keep like an average over a period of time of these two quantities, the airtime metric is essentially what it does is kind of quantifies how much effort in terms of time it took for you to send 1 byte of data out to the next hop. So it's kind of a normalized effort kind of a indicator, but you do it completely passively without any intrusion to the ongoing data traffic. So the one question that arises is, if there is no data traffic, then how do you estimate in the absence? So you need something to bootstrap the network when there is no data traffic. So one of the approaches that the standard 802.11s mesh networking standard suggests is use some constants. Basically, those are the constants that they suggest, and that comes out to some fixed value 0.1759 microseconds per bit is what the constant. But we argue in our approach that, I mean, instead of using those constants, you can do slightly better. And our approach is essentially it uses a technique which Sully and Zibin have proposed in their metric. And the main idea is every node passively tries to observe based on its virtual carrier sense, or the NAV, what is the activity that was reported or seen in a given observation duration. And from that, it tries to compute if I were to send a packet if I were to actually send a packet out, what would be the medium access delay I would encounter. So basically, we try to replace this constant OCA with some meaningful channel access delay estimate based on our passive estimation. So combining all these passive estimation techniques, basically we try to evaluate. So what we have done is essentially put together this in a framework where you use both the airtime and the ETX metric with AODV routing protocol, and did a performance evaluation with this kind of a scenario with a 10 by 10 grid, large number, 150 kilobits per second per flow, and we found that essentially at higher offered loads, whatever benefits that you may actually have based on the ETX kind of metric are kind of nullified because of the overheads associated with the actual probing every second that goes on. So whereas our passive approach, you are able to have much better latencies because there's essentially no overhead and you have a better metric than just the ETX metric. So this kind of gives you a feel for some of the cross-layer route selection, the problems with the underlying cross-layer route selection techniques. And now our focus is on improving the overall, if you look at a multi-hop wireless network, we want to try and improve the overall forwarding efficiency of the multi-hop network as a whole. So let me just explain what is the problem associated in this area, and this actually represents collaborative work with Dr. Arup Acharya and Archan Mishra from IBM Research Labs. So the basic problem in a multi-hop packet forwarding in 802.11 like network is, the first issue is there is a route lookup latency. So essentially, as I mentioned before, a packet as it exits a node and hits an intermediate node B, it is consumed at the intermediate node because it will issue an interrupt to the CPU, it will do a route lookup, it will send the packet back down to the interface, and the interface again sends it out to the next hop. So essentially, first source of latency here is that for every packet you are going up the stack, down the stack, up the stack, down the stack at each hop along the node. And in addition to that, there is medium access latencies at every node, because basically you have to, at the end of every transaction, you have to again recontend for access to the medium at every hop, and that kind of penalizes you severely as you go along the way. So if you have a network with or a path which spans several hops, then essentially your latencies can be quite high because of these two sources. So what we have proposed is essentially to address each of the problems is a combination of what we call the label-based switching, where you want to try and restrict all of the route lookups, if you will, contain it within the network interface card itself. So you do kind of a switching based on fast switching based on hardware capabilities. So that eliminates the route lookup latencies. And further, to actually enable the packet to go out as quickly as it can on the downstream hop, we also propose some MAC enhancements, which I'll explain in the slide here. So let's say you have done a quick label-based lookup and the packet is ready to go out on the next hop, but it's of no use if you still have to recontend for medium access at the next hop. So essentially what we have proposed is a simple enhancement to the 802.11 MAC, where you have your normal RTS, CTS data exchange, and instead of just sending a simple acknowledgement back to the source, since you have already reserved the medium for the data and the ACK, what we do instead of just sending a simple ACK is send a combination packet. It's a single packet, but it's called a combo ACK RTS packet, and the idea is that that packet acts as an acknowledgement for the previous data hop to this node, and it also acts as an attempt to pre-reserve the next hop for the next hop along the path. So if the next hop C is free and the medium is free, then it can immediately reply with a CTS back, and effectively what you have is like a cut through transfer without incurring the latencies or the backoffs at every hop along the path. So using a combination of this fast switching in the interface card itself and the MAC extensions, basically you can enable this quick end-to-end cut through kind of a transfer. So we've implemented this. We didn't have any control over the MAC layer based on in the experimental evaluation. So basically, we have resorted to mainly simulation-based ways to evaluate this, and we find that essentially you get in all scenarios. Essentially, you get around 2 times improvement in the overall latencies based on the cut-through forwarding as well as the MAC enhancements that we have proposed. And one thing to note here is that in these evaluations, we have used fixed routing. So routing was now independent. We've kind of fixed the routes initially, and then we just wanted to evaluate how much benefits you get from just doing a good or a quick switch, label-based switching, and good cut-through like MAC. So of course, if you want to now improve so for example, you can run into a scenario where, let's say, the route chosen, the fixed route chosen was this, and effectively then what you have is your node here will try to cut through, but since there is another flow, essentially it will fall back to the basic A211 mode, and then there will be a failed cut through and you lose all the benefits. So we argue that essentially instead of doing this, why not make use of what we have previously learned, which is in the airtime cross-layer metric. Can you do something better by making use of some kind of an interference-aware route selection, so as to kind of separate these two flows out and let them successfully cut through end to end. So this kind of motivates our design, which I'm going to talk about in the next slide. And the idea here is that it's a very simple illustration where we have this 2 flows and 5 different topologies that I've chosen. And what I want to do is try and motivate why we need this, why a slightly better routing can help. And yet, if you look at topology E, essentially you have probably the routing has chosen the crappiest path, and both the flows intersect. And the performance that you get in topology E with A211 as well as DCMA is about 16 versus 13 milliseconds in terms of latency. But now, if you combine, so basically the DCMA or the approach we mentioned previous, that alone gives you roughly a 1.2 times or like 3 millisecond improvement, even though you have a crappy route selection. But let's say you were somehow able to get this path or this path for the 2 flows, then essentially what you have is you can go all the way down to 8 milliseconds, which is like 100% improvement. So this is a very simple illustration, which basically we're trying to make a point here is that to maximize or improve the number of cut throughs, it might help if you look at slightly better in route selection techniques. So this kind of takes us into our cross-layer enabled cut-through architecture, which kind of leverages what we have learned so far. And what we have learned is we have done some studies using the airtime based metric. We have done some studies using the label based forwarding and the cut-through enhancements. So in this, we kind of put the whole thing together and call this create an architecture where essentially you have in the control plane, you have interference aware route selection, which tries to find good quality or low interference routes in a given space, and combined with label based forwarding and cut through medium access to actually take care of efficient multi-hop packet delivery along the way. So our approach is essentially trying to leverage the airtime metric, and in here what we explore is a diversity of paths. So in this architecture, we essentially use route requests, and a multiplicity of paths is explored on the way back. For example, in this scenario, in our scenario, basically the destination will reply to at the most max RREP, which in our design we have chosen to be equal to 3. So the idea is that the destination can send back route replies along different paths, and the source can then evaluate based on what's the least airtime to the destination. It can choose a path based on that. Now this max RREP is a design criterion because it's a trade-off between overhead of like sending too many route replies along the path as compared to the performance benefits that you may actually get. So basically this is a trade-off, and essentially what we have is, since new flows will always come in, you need a mechanism to make sure that you kind of take into account the arrival of new flows and the changes in the traffic and the interference caused by those new flows. So basically we have a periodic re-evaluation phase where you send this route request out once every often, not very often though, because it's a network-wide broadcast. So basically you have a periodic re-evaluation phase, which every 5 or 10 seconds in our design. So putting all those together, essentially what we have done is evaluate those two scenarios with so the scenarios we are looking at is basically 802.11 with some AODV like forwarding, as compared to a more interference aware route selection with a cut through kind of forwarding. So we see that so we have looked at two different cases. One, the one on the left essentially covers the case where you have very low spatial densities, and by low spatial densities I mean that I've chosen the maximum length of the path to be at the most 3 hops. So basically what I'm trying to do is make sure that the flows are not packed too closely to each other, and there is some scope for the routing protocol to actually find a route around so as to avoid interference with the other flow. And in the other case, what we look at is basically a more packed scenario where you have higher spatial densities because the paths are now longer and the number of flows is larger. So there is a chance, more chance of the two flows to actually interfere with each other. And so in both of these scenarios, you see that you get an improvement based on either finding a path around the network, or in case you are not able to find a path around the network, you still get improvements based on the cut through efficiencies or saving of the interframe spacing that you have done because of your medium layer enhancements. So basically even at yeah. One is with max hops 7 and one is with, so it's just different levels of spatial density. So one is with the maximum number of hops.
So does that mean if the maximum hop is around 10, is it more dense or is less dense?
It's probabilistically more dense. I mean, it's like
That's a little bit contradictory because the trend is if it's more dense, that means your improvement is less. But here, the more dense it is, the greater improvement you have.
That is basically because of the medium access improvements. So basically at that point, the more dense your network is, there is not too much scope for the routing protocol to find any routes around or whatever. So exactly. So but then at then your medium access layer essentially saves a lot of time, because you're saving duration or a IFS or what's a back off at every hop along the way, essentially at the MAC layer. So basically at higher spatial densities, your gains are mainly due to the label based forwarding and MAC improvements that you do. Because yeah, the longer the path, the better improvement the MAC will give you. So it's like a, yeah, I mean a mixture, a combination of both these give you the gains also. But it's a good point, and that's kind of what will motivate the next part of my talk, which is essentially this. So basically, if you have higher spatial densities where you run into problems where the routes are definitely going to hit each other and there's nothing you can do. So basically what do you do in those cases? So you have to look at some kind of a time-based coordination amongst the flows, and it need not be explicit a reservation-based mechanism. It could be something like a soft reservations, which I'll talk about later. And the other issue that I'm going to point out is from the earlier approach is that for the DCMA or the cut through MAC to work, every packet transfer, if you saw, required an RTS CTS exchange so as to kind of do pre-reservation for the next hop. So the burden of reserving the medium for the next hop access lies with the MAC protocol in our previous design, and basically whereas the routing is just responsible for finding a path end to end, and that's it. So we argue that instead of doing this, first of all, in order to address this case where you have a higher spatial density, you definitely need some kind of a time coordination of the flows. So we argue that basically instead of having the MAC do this, let's make the design a little simpler, where since route lookups are already doing an end-to-end establishment of the path, because it has to do a route discovery across the network and then establish some kind of a soft state at the intermediate nodes, because the intermediate nodes will record an entry for that particular path. So there's already some state maintenance that's going on when you do a route request. So why not actually make use of that in order to actually set up or a kind of a soft reservation, and I'll explain through an illustration what that means. So try to establish a soft reservation in the routing phase itself and keep the MAC design much simpler, much cleaner, and more like burst kind of mode, where you eliminate all the RTS, CTS requirements that you need at the MAC layer currently. So essentially what I'm trying to say, I'm going to illustrate with an example in the next slide, is you kind of migrate the functionality of reserving the medium for every hop to the routing layer, and you try to reserve the medium for the entire path. So we are trying to go from a more hop by hop kind of approach to an entire path kind of approach. Like you're trying to do a soft reservation for the entire path and then do a quick burst transfer by using a more efficient MAC design. So at the MAC layer, what we propose is a mechanism which is similar to what 802.11e proposes, which is there is this method called a TXOP, and the main idea here is that instead of having to do a back off or whatever for every packet, what you can do is try to negotiate a certain interval called a transmit opportunity, where you can send multiple data frames separated by the minimum mandated interval, so as to improve the efficiency of utilization of the channel. So you kind of extend the same concept to a more multi-hop scenario, and the idea is that now first of all you eliminate all the RTS, CTS overheads associated with the previous method, and once you have kind of set up your soft reservations, which I'll explain later, you can then use this quick cut through kind of or a burst kind of a transfer, a multi-hop burst transfer at the MAC layer to send your packets quickly across. And the burst transfer essentially is at the intermediate node, it acknowledges the packet back and sends the ongoing packet to the next hop just after the minimum SIFS interval, instead of a diffs and a back off as in the case of 802.11. So I want to explain this with a simple illustration and try to see if I can convey the idea. So the basic idea here is you have a first flow from node 1 to node 3. There is no other flow ongoing at this point of time. So the first flow basically initiates a route discovery because it doesn't know a path to the destination. The route replies come back all the way to the source, and in our design what we have done is in the route reply we have an indicator which basically tells the source node whether any of the nodes, including the destination or the intermediate nodes, have knowledge of an ongoing burst mode activity in the vicinity or whether flowing through them. So the route reply has an indicator which gives the source this information. So for this particular flow, both of these nodes have their navs, or there's no other flow in the vicinity. So both of these flows indicate to node 1 that the path is kind of clear for you to initiate your burst. So once the source receives this particular indication, what it'll do is try to now set up a confirmation for this. It's a loose confirmation, but it sends an explicit acknowledgement, route reply acknowledgement, to tell these nodes, intermediate node and a destination, that hey, since you have indicated there is no flow that's going on, I'm going to be scheduling my burst from now until a particular configurable burst duration. And the burst duration, as I'll explain later, is configurable. So it can last for the entire session of the flow, or you can have it for a fraction of the flow. But the idea is that the source then signals that it will basically be sending a burst using this route reply packet, and following that it actually sends a burst for the duration that it has indicated. So now let's say that in the meantime, while this first flow is bursting, the second flow arrives here. Now the second flow wants the path, it initiates its own route discovery from node 4 to node 7, and the packets along the way as the route. So first of all, the difference between some of the earlier approaches or hard reservations and our approaches, we essentially allow the control traffic to flow through even when you are supporting your burst mode. So we don't completely eliminate any other traffic, which would result in blocking of several flows which try to go across in the same time. So first of all, we allow the control traffic to flow through, and on the way back, essentially your node 2, since it is serving the current burst mode, it will indicate to node 4 using the route reply field that we have, that there is an ongoing burst until T soft reservation, and the route reply will essentially hit the source of the second flow here. So once the source has knowledge that there's an ongoing burst, essentially what it tries to do is, of course, it first confirms, sends a confirmation back, indicating the nodes that I'm going to be sending my own burst at the end of the current burst that's going on. And eventually at the end, what you actually do is, instead of just waiting for the current burst to be over, you actually start in something what we call a slow mode. And the slow mode is essentially a regular 802.11 like mode. So basically there's a fast guy like sending packets in the burst mode, and a slow guy trying to slowly send. And eventually what happens is, so this is like a timeline of the same scenario that I had. So I'm trying to what happens is, essentially when the flow 1 schedules its burst for T soft reservation, and let's say flow 2 arrives in the middle of the burst, based on the signaling mechanism, it knows that the burst is going to last till this duration. So it indicates that I'm going to be sending my burst starting from this duration for the next T soft reservation, and continues to send in a slow mode until then. And eventually when you hit the T soft reservation, the first flow will essentially now fall back to a slow mode if it has any remaining packets to send, while the second flow will basically move to a more quick burst mode. So if you look at the whole dynamics, essentially what we're trying to do is, there's multiple flows. We consider that all of the flows have equal priority, so we don't want to starve any of the flows. We want to give it enough share of the medium, and we want to give it at least one burst opportunity in their whole life cycle. And we argue that this burst opportunity can be controllable. I mean, if you want to, it's like a tunable parameter, where if you set your burst opportunity to the entire flow duration, then it's kind of a priority based access that you can give to the entire flow. So that's the basic idea of this whole scenario, where you're trying to pack the flows together, allow a burst, one burst per flow, and make sure that none of the flows are being starved while doing this, essentially. So it's trying to pack together flows in time, giving them enough opportunity, at least one opportunity to send their burst through. This is just a simple, to clarify the differences between the previous and the new approach. So in the clear approach, what we did is essentially did a route request, route reply, and there was a airtime based route selection at this point. And from then on, we had the label based forwarding and the cut through MAC, which took care of doing the hop by hop or next hop pre-reservations. So basically we decoupled a route selection and the actual reservations in this manner. But moving to a more moving to our enhancement, what we essentially do in this scenario is try to do a soft reservation, because you're already doing a complete end-to-end path establishment. So why not try to do a soft reservation during that time? And then keep our MAC design very simple, where if you have this soft reservation for a particular duration, you just send data ACK and followed by CIFS interval. So basically you cut down on all these RTS, CTS, and all the signaling overheads associated with this particular mechanism. And that's the main advantage that you get out of the other method. So we did an evaluation of this particular enhancement with the baseline, which is, as I mentioned, just basic 802.11 and AODV with no frills. And we see that basically from point of view of cut through, you see some improvement in the overall cut through performance with this particular method as compared to the previous one. And in the latencies also, there is definitely an improvement. Like for 15 flows, the average latency per packet per flow is around 200 milliseconds for the baseline, whereas ours is about 100 or so milliseconds. So fraction of packets that cut. So basically the cut through is defined as I mark the packet at the source. There is a simple bit that I use in the MAC header, which is an unused bit. So I mark it as 1 in the source. Anytime in the medium, anytime in the path, if the node has to defer or do a back off because it didn't get access to the medium, it kind of flips the bit to a 0, and at the destination records this, whether if it's a 1, it means the packet was successfully cut through end to end without any interference or any disruptions, and if it's a 0, the packet was, there was some disruptions along the way.
Performance of the cut through, but
correct.
in terms of actual performance of the network, left-hand side graph.
So it's basically a total number of packets in the network and how many of them were successfully cut through. Right.
If you disable the CTS RTS, what kind of benefit you get from it?
But this is with CTS RTS. Oh, you mean disable RTS CTS in 802.11? You definitely save up on some of the. It's basically you're trying to reduce the competing traffic, and there is definitely an improvement. But if you compare just pure 802.11 without RTS CTS with our DCMA kind of mechanism, you will DCMA still comes up a little ahead, but the differences are not as great as you would see with a 802.11. But it's like it's the argument like whether or not RTS CTS makes any sense for a multi-hop network. I mean, effective is RTS CTS finally. So I mean that's the argument which has always been there. So.
I should point out when you give this result, green and blue looks like they're overlapping, but what happens? The clear and clear plus.
Okay.
What happens is you need to plot this for high priority flows and rest.
Yes.
The purpose is to differentiate.
Actually, I have. I'm kind of not.
You get significant.
No, definitely. Yeah. So actually, this is kind of.
You have video flowing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So actually, that's what I want to kind of lead into. So basically, you can use. So the main question we want to ask is, instead of our assumption that all flows are equal, can we make use of this mechanism in order to actually provide a more differentiated service to some special flows based on our. You can think of it as like a very latency socket, which the application can use, a multi-hop socket, if you will, to send your data across multiple hops as quickly as possible. So the idea here is that can you extend this architecture to a more priority oriented or a differentiated services kind of architecture, where if you have like a high priority flow, for example, some video surveillance camera wants to indicate some activity quickly back to the observation point, can that flow be given a priority as compared to competing traffic? So basically, you can do a simple adaptation of our model where you can extend the soft reservation interval all the way up to the flow duration, entire flow duration, and correspondingly the other flows, instead of continuing to send in a slow mode, which they were doing, they can actually strictly defer until the end of the existing high priority. So we try to motivate like a very simple scenario where there is this one high priority flow that arrives. If you look at the time axis, basically there are 4 flows which are background flows at time t equal to 10, and at time t equal to 12, basically a high priority flow arrives, which wants to send data for, let's say, the next 4 seconds or whatever. And so it indicates using our mechanism in the soft reservation from t equal to 12 to 16. And let's say there's 2 other flows that arrive, which are again background flows, low priority flows, which arrive in the middle of this corresponding burst. So what we can do for this case is you can strictly defer until your cut through or the high priority flow is done, and then resume your transmission. And even though this is a very simple case, essentially gives you a feel for some of the gains that you can observe. So basically the x-axis here is the different offered loads, or how fast the high priority flow is pumping packets into the network, and you would like to send packets as fast as possible into the network. So basically, if you look at the rightmost plot, these are the gains based on our time coordinated mechanism as compared to what you would see from just a cut through with some route selection or baseline 802.11, which provides you nothing. So we're kind of trying to motivate like the application of this model to a more service differentiation or differentiated services kind of architecture, where you can actually use this to do some priority serving for high priority flows.
Yeah. Why does the clear plus line increase at all?
Why does the clear plus line
Go from 750 to 1000? Why does it go up?
Okay, let me try to think. Oh, that's just because of self interference, queuing effects. Yeah, I mean more offered load. So I mean there is a point beyond which you will start to see the. I mean even though you are sending just separated by SIFs, there is a point beyond which.
What is the model you use for the simulation? You could have a queued MAC.
Yeah, it's a queued MAC. So I think, yeah, it's just a more offered load. Which, yeah.
Let's say if you have two high priority real-time flows,
Hmm.
and then if you use cut-through, I think actually will hurt rather than help. Because in that case, maybe to have some latency is okay, but if as far as the latency is steady and every latency is below a threshold,
Hmm.
if you use cut-through, then it's a burst and a long latency, burst and long latency. In some situations, that's not preferred.
I agree. So basically, it's that. So it's not very clear to me what's the right T soft reservation. I mean that is basically what controls what is your burst duration as opposed to the slow mode duration. So you can basically, playing around with that parameter, you can do a lot of things. And again, based on what the background traffic does. I mean, if it does a slow mode during that, then again there will be problems. But if you completely defer, then you might have. So it's basically, yeah. No, I agree. I
So
mean,
in a
that's,
dense environment, you can hope that not all the flows use the same node. They can go around. And so you should be able to put 8, 10 of these simultaneously. But of course, if they start intersecting quite often, then that goes.
yeah. So then, I mean, there is like a given 2D space, and there is probably a maximum you can do with just the space and the time dimension. I mean, then you have to look at,
That's where physics work comes in,
yeah.
where you try to time coordinate.
Yeah. So actually, I want to just quickly,
So here,
sorry.
is there a trade-off to you might want to minimize the number of nodes that are participating, or it doesn't exist?
So actually, you can think of having some kind of admission control mechanism where you actually do this, because our approach is still like the source controls when to send the packet. So it can kind of tie in well with any call admission control kind of techniques, where if you see that there is something going on, then you can either indicate your up to the application saying inject a little slowly, or kind of do a back pressure build up. So I'm not sure if that was a question, but
Well, the question here is actually, because in sensor network, sometimes you want to minimize the number of nodes who are running. So you may want to double book a single flow. So here, the thing is you don't want to do that, right? You want to distribute.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So here, I mean, we don't have, we assume all nodes are happy and okay with forwarding.
All right.
Yeah.
What value of T soft reservation do you use in your simulation?
So for my simulation, I've used like 4 different values, and I've kind of averaged. So it's like 500 milliseconds, 1 second, 2 second, and 100 milliseconds. So I basically have an average for. It's a CBR like traffic, so with a certain offered load.
So would you be able to implement this with 802.11e drivers right now?
Yes, for let me try to see. Actually, no. Wait. I'm trying to see the MAC. Yeah, sure. I'm trying to see like what, because the acknowledgement is beyond our control. The acknowledgement usually comes from the hardware, and you cannot control when the acknowledgement will go out. But from in our design, we don't really need to control anything, because if you see that, well, if you disable the ACK, then the problem is like, if you lose packet somewhere along the 7th hop, then how do you like recover? So then you have to do the transport protocol problems all over at the MAC layer. Then so yeah.
I don't understand how you support slow mode. If you have a fast traffic,
Huh?
it's SIFs, data SIFs.
So it's basically so whenever I want to switch to slow mode, I indicate it in the IP type of service. I'm overloading the IP type of service at the source to indicate if it's a 0, then the MAC. So it's a signal to the MAC to just use the regular 802.11 like mode to transfer. So there is some cross layer information flowing.
But there will be a mode in the middle which might not be able to use that because it's slow.
It's a packet by packet, so it doesn't maintain any state. It looks at the packet. If the one field, then it will do it a SIFs based thing. If it has 0 field, it will do a diffs based thing. So it's a kind of a stateless at the intermediate node. So basically, that's the whole point. The source here, the source controls everything basically. But you can argue that it can be done at that particular point where there's actually a bottleneck, and until then both these guys can cut through. But it's a matter of like coordination. You need to maintain a lot of state then at the intermediate nodes.
It's very clever use of multi-hop.
Yeah. So actually, just to summarize our findings, so we looked at protocols for self-organization and looked at the Sohan architecture essentially to address the scalability of the networks. We've looked at cross-layer mechanisms where we used a combination of interference-aware route selection, label-based forwarding efficiencies, and improved cut-through like MAC to get performance improvements from a latency perspective. And finally we look at mechanisms to essentially have a more burst-oriented transfer based on a time coordination, and we kind of motivate how this can be applied to differentiated services. So as pointed out by many of you, there's several things that can be done to further improve this. So one of the things is, instead of now doing a per hop acknowledgement, as you saw, as Dr. A was pointing out, you can eliminate the acknowledgements and choose to do a block-like acknowledgements for several data packets. But essentially, it's a trade-off, because you have to then maintain, every node has to maintain state of how many packets were received, and it's kind of doing the transport layer all over again at the MAC layer. So that's one of the things that can be done. As Professor Yan Yong pointed out, I mean, you can do admission control based on how many flows. I mean, in order to maintain the actual load of the network, you can couple some admission control techniques here. You can further improve the efficiencies of this soft reservation, because we have chosen some fixed soft reservation duration, but you can actually do a renewal if there is no other flow that is there, then you can continue to do it at the end. So you can have some improvements there. You can do a combination of spatial and time based, where instead of just looking at one route reply coming back, you can exploit 2 or 3 different alternative paths, and then you can compare which path I have to wait the least before I can begin my burst mode. So you can try to exploit both the spatial and the time kind of dimension here. And the final goal where we want to try to go, and actually this is work done with my colleague Zibin, and he has definitely a lot more interesting numbers and details on this, is we were trying to head essentially, if you have now synchronous flows where, let's say you have like 10 flows, the problem is you have 10 flows with certain traffic demands and a certain interference modeled in a given space. So what we're trying to look at is how best to fit these flows together in time, as well as far as route selection is concerned. So we are trying to look at a joint approach to basically give out time slots to every node, saying that you transmit to this particular guy at this particular time. So you are doing a combined route selection as well as MAC scheduling based on a hard TDMA approach, and we are using a dedicated control plane to actually do this, because you want to try to reduce or eliminate all the control layer overheads and move it to a different particular control. So the whole focus or idea is essentially to migrate towards the future, which is you want to try and enable completely conflict-free, no interference, switched wireless networks. If you really want to think about wireless networks or mesh networks as a replacement for wired networks, then effectively you have to kind of reanalyze and reevaluate all this 802.11, all the drawbacks of the 802.11 and the layered implementations. And essentially this is the goal that we are trying to achieve, or probably a small step towards that goal that we are trying to achieve. So I think I may not ever get the chance to talk about this again. So I've been patient so far, so I'm just going to spend like 2 minutes on some related things that I've done. So one of them, of course, being spend a lot of time learning and building and stuff with the Orbit testbed especially. And one of the problems that we have looked at is addressing repeatability of wireless experiments. So given that, of course, the environment, you cannot ensure that it's repeatable. Software, you can control it to a certain extent by making sure you capture everything in a script so that you don't mess up any of the settings. But there is a third thing which can contribute to the repeatability of the experiment, and which is essentially the hardware that you're using. And the basic idea here is we observed some inherent differences in the hardware from a point of view of, like, if you try to set a power level to a certain value, even though the hardware comes from the same manufacturer or whatever, there are slight inherent differences in the hardware. And our whole goal here is to try and quantify those differences and make sure that in whatever adaptive approaches that are used, you try to make sure you know what the actual card is doing. For example, if your adaptive approach wants you to set the power level to 5, whereas the card actually sets it to 3 or something. So you want to try and document all these changes, and that's what this approach. So we kind of build a framework to do this calibration for the hardware that's used in the grid. A more interesting work which I did with Kishore is basically this is again a artifact of the hardware that we use in the grid, and what this captures is essentially a phenomenon that we observed, which is a physical layer capture. And the basic idea here is that as you already know, when two packets collide in the regular or the analytical models, both of them are lost. But what we observed here is that even if two packets collide or arrive at the same time at the receiver, the Atheros based hardware here was able to actually pick out information and actually decode the stronger packet, and it discarded the weaker packet. So because of this ability of the card, you see that there's an inherent throughput unfairness that we saw, because like it's the nearer flow or the stronger flow always got through, whereas the other flow, since it had to back off, it kind of suffered considerably. So there was a very significant unfairness in the observed throughput. So we have looked at various cross-layer mechanisms to try and restore this fairness, and of course looked at how to first detect this phenomenon, which Kishore has contributed a lot. And finally, it's a very interesting problem which we worked at during my internship at Avaya Research Labs on actually building a complete prototype and a working system for doing infrastructure-based location estimation. And our basic idea was a signal strength RSSI map-based approach. And the benefits that we had was we kind of reduced the amount of profiling that was needed by doing more statistical splining and interpolation models to build your actual data. And the whole idea here was to automate the complete process of calibrating the environment by using a combination of sniffers and chirps. So basically, if you see on the figure on the right, it essentially points out that your environment changes over time. So you cannot use the same radio map to do location estimation. You have to kind of periodically recalibrate your basic RF map in order to make sure that you are able to do signature-based location estimation well. So essentially, this was a project which we got with a working solution there. And just a summary of some of the publications that resulted from a lot of the work that I've done. In the area of mesh networks, there's a few which talk about each aspect of what I described in the Sohan. Some of the cross-layer experimental evaluations on the orbit testbed, the location estimation techniques, and finally some more orbit experimental evaluations. There's a recent one with a student who's graduated. So that's kind of an outline, and I would like to thank all the people here who have been, I mean, each of these names here, and of course I've missed out a lot, but each of these people have like a unique contribution in these 5 years. My advisor is Professor Ray Chaudhary. I mean, I cannot thank him enough for his patience, his vision, and basically cajoling me in the right direction. And finally, I'm here at this day just because of him, basically. Of course, all my colleagues and the other committee members, of course, Professor Yanyong Zhang, Professor Trappi, Arup, who has agreed to make 2 trips in 3 days. I'll thank him for that. Professor Zhang, thank you for being on the committee at a short notice. Actually, all my colleagues from the orbit, we had a lot of fun, a lot of interesting demos and times before and after the demos. My research colleague Zibin has been a phenomenal peer colleague with given me a lot of interesting feedback and comments, and all of these people have been fun to work with, and I've probably collaborated with each and every one of them. And of course the staff of WinLab who have kept this a beautiful and a pleasant experience. I mean, it has been a very smoothly executed operation, and I really thank them for this comfortable stay here. And of course, my industry collaborators, Dr. Arup Acharya and Archana Mishra, whom I worked with, my collaborators from Avaya during my first internship, and Intel, where I got a chance to spend and actually transfer some technology and by building a small mini orbit testbed during the summer that I spent there. So I'd like to thank everybody for attending, for your patience and listening to what I had to say. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you.